Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to Inspire SA. Today, I'm your host, Narcis Mbuyu, and I have to say it's been a while since we've been on air. Things have been quite hectic on behind the scenes, living life and trying to balance everything out, but still stay committed to bring out quality content and take videos out there for people to be empowered and inspired at the same time. So on today's session of Inspire Say, we have our presenter Koketso, who will be giving us an introduction to the cloud and to data. So I'm gonna welcome him out so that he can give us a glimpse of what he'll be taking us throughout today's session. Welcome, Koketso.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you? Are you enjoying your afternoon, bro?
Yeah, it's a late afternoon in SA. The weather is changing up on us. So, yeah, how's things on your side?
Things are like it's just quite hectic, trying to balance things here and there, but it's manageable, I have to say. Mhm.
Awesome, awesome.
What do you have in
Yeah,
store for
man,
us today?
it's been a while. So first and foremost, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world watching this. It's been a while since I've joined uh, or given a session. But yeah, so basically, what's going to be happening for the next 4 weeks? Actually, we're going to be having a four-part series where I'll be just talking and sharing a lot of knowledge to you guys in terms of everything you need to know about data, everything you need to know about the cloud, and how do these two terms actually work hand in hand today, because it's concepts that are really quite important, and I feel like not a lot of people are doing justice and actually getting to know the in-depths and even the basics of what, data and what cloud is all about. So hopefully you guys will stick with us for the next 4 weeks. Hopefully you guys will take a lot from this. And obviously at the end of it all, it's all about you just obviously trying to make a better career choice or gain a new interest within the whole space. And eventually, I'll also be sharing my personal tips in terms of how you guys can obviously ace your first AZ 900 certification, which is quite cool, and it's quite fun to also take. It's going to be quite good on your resume, and obviously, I'll be just going into details throughout the weeks in terms of the benefits of having such certifications and more other certifications moving right along.
Oh, that sounds quite awesome and interesting. Like getting to do the exam itself. So yeah, let's take us through. Let's see what you have in store.
All right. So are we ready? Can I so much just start?
Yeah, sure.
Just let me know.
Um,
Just let me know
Waiting
if you
for you.
can see everything.
The screen is loading. You're sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Not seeing anything on my side. Try hitting share again, maybe.
Oh, actually press share. Yeah. No, no, it was my mistake. Can you guys now see my screen?
Yes, it's visible now. It's visible. Wow,
All right,
what
all
a
right.
awesome.
All right. So, thank you very much. All right, guys. So, as I said, guys, this is just going to be a very nice, interesting tech talk. So, just make sure, for the purpose of this, just sit back, relax, take out your pens, take out your notepads, and it's basically all about learning about introduction to all things data and cloud. So, if you guys don't know me by now, my name is Koketso, also known as Capfresh Motseothata, and I am from South Africa. So basically, let's talk about the agenda for today. Right, so first and foremost, we're going to be doing the welcomings, which we obviously did, introductions, which we also covered, and I'll be just talking about obviously the introduction of myself. Then the things we're going to be covering today is what is data, right? We're going to be talking about the different kinds of data that we actually get. Then we'll be talking about the difference between data information, and then also I'll be covering obviously the second part, which is what is cloud, and then why is cloud so important to you, and the benefits of using both technologies, right? So we're going to be focusing on the benefits of the cloud as well as data, and then we're going to be looking at some of the companies today that actually use and incorporate these two together. And most importantly, we're going to end off with the first part by actually how can you actually get started with your data and your cloud journey. All right, so as you guys can see, there's a lot of information jam packed for you guys. So make sure you guys take notes. Make sure you guys, if you've got any questions, I will be leaving my details at the end of the presentation. So just make sure that you guys are really paying attention and making sure that you guys are consuming all of this information. So, just a bit about myself. I mean, why do you care about what do I have to say about this? So these are just some of my credentials. I am a software engineer as well as a full stack engineer by profession, but by qualification, I have a BSc in computer science. Also studying for my second qualification in applied mathematics. But other than that, I'm quite involved in the community as a whole. So that's why, it might seem like I'm quite involved in all of these um, other ambassador programs. So I'm talking from your Google, Microsoft, IBM, even Binance, as well as all of these wonderful things. I've also got a couple of Azure and AWS certifications. But other than that, I also like sharing knowledge. So I do have, some international speaking experience. I do have a tech blog as well on my official website. As you guys can see, the link is over there as well. So if you guys want to reach, please make sure that you guys do reach out to me, keep in touch with me. And yeah, if you've got any questions, but this is not about me. This is definitely not about me at all. Let's talk about what exactly is data, right? So a lot of people call it data. All in all, we're just gonna really break down what exactly is it. Is it the airtime? Is it the bundles? Is it the information we consume? But basically, we're going to be breaking down what data is in a traditional sense, right? So basically, data, when you look at the word, the full definition of what data is, data basically it is just facts or statistics or information that has been gathered either through forms of text, transcribes, or multimedia. So when I mean multimedia, I'm talking in terms of pictures, I'm talking videos, and I'm talking music. And this is something called big data, but it's something that we're going to touch on in a few, probably next week, right? But you just need to understand what the real definition of what data is really all about. And obviously, we're going to be diving deep in terms of why is data really important. But the first thing we need to understand is that data, obviously, it's all deals with about facts, right? Data is all factual, right? So knowing about what kind of data and what to do with the data is obviously the next step. But we first need to establish what is data, right? So the first thing we need to understand that data is all about facts, right? It's all about facts. It's about statistics or items of information that it is gathered. Now you need to understand that there are two forms of data, right? You first have your primary data, which is data that is actually being created. So when I mean being created, it means that you can getting information from either researchers or surveys or questionnaires. So this is obviously fresh new data that's being generated. Then you have a secondary source, which is data that already exists, right? So data from archives, data from research papers, things like reports. Those are data that has already existed that we can still use access to, right? But now let's look at the different types of data, right? Remember, I spoke about there are different kinds of data. So now, as you can see, there are four really different kind of data, but there are two categories, right? Which is actually quantitative and qualitative. But I'm going to actually break it down into simple terms. So the first one we have is nominal data, right? Nominal data is basically just storing information in different variables, right, without any types of quantitative value. So in terms of classifying cars, classifying, buses, classifying motorbikes, right, that will be considered as nominal data. Now, ordinal data, which basically is the same thing as nominal data, but it's actually much more structured, right? So it organizes the data. So from biggest to smallest, or from fastest to slowest, the newest to the oldest, and so forth. So that's basically nominal data. And these two data is actually what we call quantitative data, right? And now we're going to move on to the other two types, which is discrete and continuous. So discrete data, it involves data that can be counted but only using integers, right? So this is obviously a number that cannot be divided into smaller parts. So think about a number of students in a classroom, or a number of people in a restaurant, or a number of sweets in a box, right? You can't have half a student in a classroom, right? You can't have so as you can see, it deals with the distinctively whole numbers, right? And continuous data, also on the other hand, this is the data that can be actually divided into smaller parts. So when I'm looking at the height of a student, right? So the a height of a student can be 1.4 meters. So as you can see now, we can actually include decimals in the set. So that's how we can actually have different types of data. And as you guys can see, we can actually organize and restructure and actually position data in many different forms and they're very different sizes. So that's why it's quite important to also know what type of data that you are dealing with, right? So now let's move on to something called information, right? So a lot of people that, I mean, if you've done a bit of technology, you might have heard of this term that data versus information, right? And right now you might be also feeling a bit confused, like, but what has information got to do with anything? But we need to actually understand the two phenomenon that in data, we actually deal with data and information, right? So if you look deeper into that, the data is actually data that is raw, unprocessed, unorganized, unrelatable data, right? Which means this is data that is just being either consumed from a third party API, from a spreadsheet, from a sensor or whatever, right? So this is just data that we're just getting that we really don't understand what's the meaning of it all. But now then comes information, right? So information basically it is the ready-made, it's the processed, organized, cleansed data that actually makes sense and meaning, right? So for instance, if I am a student and I go to a pharmacy, I'm just going to be looking at spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets without actually knowing information, right? Rather than if I have the proper information, knowing that, oh, okay, I'm actually looking at prescription pills, or maybe I'm looking at chronic medication and so forth. So information actually just places the data in a much more readable way that we can understand and actually makes meaning towards us. And for us to actually understand the data that we're working with, we are able to use the data for much more meaningful things. So now another most important thing that you guys need to understand is that information equals data plus meaning, right? What is the point of having so much data, but you can't even put any significant meaning or get any value out of it? That means it's we just, wasting precious, valuable time, energy, resources, and most importantly, data. And you must know that obviously relevant data is always the best data. So data does deplete over time, right? So looking at the data that we have 5 years ago, or information that we knew about something, especially in tech 5 years ago, is totally different to what we know about tech today, right? So Data actually does deplete within value, but that does not mean that data is not important. All data is still mandatory and it's still needed, and some organizations keep data for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, think about the government. They keep information from everyone that's basically alive since the beginning of time until today, right? I mean, you don't want your, just because you're 50 years old, you don't want your information to be thrown away just because it's irrelevant to someone else, right? You still want to keep relevant data. So that's why it is important to understand and to keep valuable data. And that's why it's also to keep valuable data in that sense, right? Now, another thing is that a lot of people actually confuse the term statistics with data, right? And we're going to be diving into more of these complicated terms in other series, but I just want you guys to just know that statistics is definitely not the same as data, right? Statistics basically is just it is the results of actually from analytics and data transformation, right? So we're going to be touching about that in a later stage. So if you've heard the word of stats or statistics or the status quo or the status of this is, don't worry about all of those fancy terms. Right now, today, we are not focused on that. We're just going to be purely focusing on what data is, right? So now we're going to be talking about what is the cloud, right? The cloud, right? In the sky, is it something magical? Is it in my pocket? Is it in the air? Is it somewhere I can buy in the shop? But a lot of people actually don't understand that the cloud, well, it's an inside joke that a lot of developers say that the cloud is not really a cloud, it's just someone else's computer, which is essentially is true, right? So when we look closer into the definition, is that the cloud basically refers to the servers that are actually connected throughout the whole world, right? So when I mean the whole world, I really mean the internet, right? So the internet obviously comprises of things like the software, databases, servers, networking, and everything that actually has to do with everything in between. But the biggest thing, or the biggest way you can actually think about the cloud, is actually the cloud is the new internet, the new cool internet, right? And you will see why the cloud is so important, why it's so cool, and why it is so important to you as an individual, right? So let's dive more into a bit more detail, right? So in terms of the cloud, usually it's broken down into either cloud computing or cloud storage, right? This basically is just giving us the power to leverage all the cloud capabilities that we can do. But just bear in mind is that I'm going to give you a scenario where imagine you are sitting at home and you are typing an essay that is due for tomorrow because they give it to you for 2 weeks. But miraculously, you just remembered that, oh my goodness, I need to submit this assignment within the next 24 hours, and you are there on your PC typing this assignment. It counts 50% for your semester mark, so you have to make sure that you complete this assignment. So you are typing, and out of the blue, here comes an earthquake, and it starts to shatter everything, right? It damages the whole house, it damages your PC, and oh my goodness, it's a disaster, right? When you look at your PC, it's broken, it's coming out smoke and everything. The first things first, what you're thinking about is, oh my goodness, my assignment is lost, right? So, number two, you're already thinking that all of the cost and all of the time and all of the energy that you have spent on this assignment has gone to waste, right? Now, that's where the magic of how cloud computing comes in. Same scenario, you are typing away, and what you're doing, instead of saving your work physically onto your hard drive, you are actually saving your work onto something called the cloud, which is the internet, right? So here it goes, and there's an earthquake, and everything is damaged, but you're actually relieved because why? You're absolutely sure and you are guaranteed that your work is actually now stored in a global network where it will not be hacked, it will not be damaged, and it is purely secure and it's safe. Now, how does this actually work? How does this phenomenon actually work? So obviously we have something called cloud providers. So you probably heard them, which is Microsoft Azure, um, Amazon, AWS, as well as Google, even IBM, and so forth, right? So these actually are called service providers, and each service provider obviously has their own terms and conditions in terms of how do they handle storage and how do they handle computing power. So the most important thing right now is that one of the biggest actually advantages about cloud is that it's actually on demand and it's actually available at any time, at anywhere, as long as you are connected to the internet. I mean, you could go to a different country and your information can still be available. You can be, no matter what time zone, whatever hour, at 8, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever time you are in the world, you are able to access your information in the speed of lightning. It is ready for you. It is definitely, not encrypted. It doesn't have any viruses, and you are 100% sure that your data, your information, is actually stored in a very secure place. And when I mean data, guys, as I said, data can come in many forms and sizes. So it doesn't necessarily have to be text or text files. It can be things like MP3s. It can be things like movies. It can be things like CSV files. It can be programs even. So depending on obviously how big and the scale is. And the nice thing about cloud computing is that it has unlimited capabilities. Unlimited capabilities meaning unlimited storage, and it is super, super reliable, right? So now you're probably asking yourself, okay, so I know what this data thing is all about. I know what this cloud thing is all about, but why is it so important to me? Like, okay, so now tell me, why is this actually so important to me, right? First and foremost, the reason why data is so important is that it actually helps us to make better business decisions, right? Not even just business decisions, but even just personal decisions. You know, for instance, if you're looking at your diet plan and you obviously have followed this diet plan for, let's say, 2 weeks, you already have data that can show you the things that have improved in the first month versus the things that have improved in the second month, right? So it actually keeps us on track with the real world examples. So remember, as I told you, that data is all factual, so you can't really lie about data, right? Data also is a sense of proof in terms of should there be any things that go wrong, things that go missing. That actually leads into like fraud detection, right? So keeping data is actually quite important for actually looking back into minimizing the risk, identifying risks, and actually coming with more improved strategies to actually improve these business solving skills. And essentially, at the end of the day, data has actually proven to show that it has saved a lot of people's lives and a lot of people's money. Right. And now let's look at cloud. Why is cloud so important? As I mentioned, the biggest thing about cloud is that it is leveraging its storage capacities as well as its security features, right? You can say that your data can always be accessed at anywhere at any time. So it is obviously instant and it is ready on the go and on the fly, right? Which is ideal for in case you are working from different remote places. And the cool thing about cloud is that these cloud providers actually have things like backup, they have updates, they have security features, as well as updates of your data. So you don't have to worry about how big my storage space is and I need to update it or the security features. It all comes inclusively with the service provider. All right. So now let us look at a very interesting, comparison between the two. Like why obviously diving deep into the benefits of actually becoming data and cloud literate, right? So looking at the data side of things, that your data is always reliable. Data, it always improves your decision making, right? As I said, um, old data is just as important and as new data, and old data actually helps us to actually improve and make better decision making, right? Data also allows us to actually create personalization, right? So if you have customers that you actually want to cater certain information or a certain product for, you can look at the data that actually points and tells you what do people like and what people don't like, what certain people don't like, what certain people like, and what males prefer over females and so forth, what maybe people in Africa prefer from people in Europe, kind of a thing. Another thing data actually does show is that it actually helps you to detect fraud much easily, right? When there's defaults, when things don't make sense, that's when fraud actually detection happens. And also it increases productivity by having clean, available, ready data. Also helps other people to actually become more productive in terms of their everyday data life. Now, when we look in terms of cloud, as I also mentioned, is very reliable. So wherever you are in the world, you are guaranteed to know that your data is as always safe. Now, as you guys can see that data and cloud actually do work hand in hand, and they're actually like, best friends in the sense, because you know you can have data, and data is quite dependent on cloud, and cloud is also quite dependent on data. So another cool thing about data is about the cloud is that it is quite safe. It's quite safe, and the security features are obviously top notch. As I said, when it comes to all of these cloud providers, they also come with a standardized security feature. So things like security keys. Some of them have vaults, um, and all of those things, right? They also have automatic backups. So that same example that I gave you, that if there was an earthquake and you are in Africa and something bad happens there, you are guaranteed that your information is not only stored in somewhere around in Africa, it's stored all over the world. So it can there's a copy in China, there's a copy in Europe, there's a copy in Alaska even. So your information is highly, highly, highly backed up. There's always updates, right? So you don't have to worry about always updating your information, or worried about your information is going to get lost because you have to upgrade the system. As I said, there's unlimited storage. So depending how big you need storage, you can have 100 gigs, you can have 200 gigs, you have petabytes even. So there is a plethora of storage that you can actually use, compared to your normal hard drive, where your hard drive probably has 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes or 3 terabytes or 5 terabytes, where on the cloud you can obviously specify exactly how much data that you need, and it is available just like that. You don't have to purchase anything upfront, which is another cost effective way, is that you don't have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of rands or dollars, spending on data centers, or you know building these fancy big data centers that you probably won't even need because of certain workloads or so forth. And as I said, your data is always available at any time, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection, right? So now we spoke about what data is. We spoke about what cloud is all about. We've even spoke about why it is so important for you to guys to be, data and cloud literate, so that to making sure that your information is secure, to make sure that your data is relevant, it is clean, and it is secured and backed up by a very reputable, respected company. But let's look at some of the companies that actually use data and cloud together, right? So this is just an image that actually shows of all the companies right now that are using data and cloud as a whole, right? So for instance, um, okay, I'm not seeing Netflix here, but Netflix is quite a very good example of how cloud and data actually works together. Because what Netflix does is that obviously it gathers the data, which actually the first and foremost, which is the streaming entertainment platforms, right? So it's getting all of these wonderful shows for you guys, and obviously it displays them. Now, how does it display it? Well, we know that Netflix doesn't have any box offices or doesn't have any movie theater outlets that they use. So obviously they're leveraging everything on the cloud, right? So you definitely secure, you are sure that your Netflix details are actually stored and secured in a very secure way. Actually, I think Netflix actually does leverage on AWS, if I'm not mistaken, as the cloud provider. So what that means is that they're actually using a lot of AWS security features to actually bring you guys all of the latest entertainment. Now, when I spoke about personalization, remember I spoke about this is where data also comes into play. So at Netflix, obviously, they use a lot of, they have their own algorithm, and this is where machine learning comes in. So you will find that maybe you are a action person, you like a lot of action movies or a lot of action series, and Netflix obviously has an algorithm that the more action movies that you watch, it will actually help to personalize and choose other shows that actually might cater to you. So that's what we call about that. This is where um, data personalization comes in, right? Because you prefer a certain type of genre or certain type of feel in terms of movies and series versus someone that is more interested in romantic comedies, or cartoons, and so forth. So that's why data is also quite important to these companies because it helps them to make better business decisions, and by making better business decisions, it actually means more revenue for the company because you you as a customer, you are obviously purchasing their services by them providing you with all of this entertainment that you actually need, right? Same thing with Twitter. If you go on Twitter, you actually um, notice that on your timeline, there's a lot of information that is quite relevant to you, right? So if you are a sports person, you actually notice that there are more sports news versus if you someone that's not even interested in makeup, right? So as you can see that Twitter, I mean, actually, all of these, most of these data-driven companies have an algorithm that they actually sort out. So things like your Airbnb, so it will actually look at what kind of places that you like to go to, or it looks at your your geolocation in terms of the nearest places and so forth. Let's look at Uber. Uber is also another one where it uses all of your data, so it tracks your movement in terms of how frequent you actually order an Uber at a certain area. It also looks at demographics, like if you're closer to a mall or if you're closer to a residence. So as you can see, data it really does play a lot into our lives when we don't even notice it, and it is quite important to understand how to use data, how to consume data, and how to actually leverage from data, right? So, last and foremost, just before I think I'm about to close my session, is now you're probably asking yourself, okay, Koketso, like I've kind of have a basic understanding of where this whole data and all this cloud thing is happening, but how do I start? I mean, how do I begin? Who do I talk to? And so forth. And luckily for you, obviously in the tech space, we are a big community and we like to help each other, right? So when I mean community, I'm talking things like Stack Overflow. There's things like platforms like this, actually, Microsoft Inspire, where we come together and we share data. Is that first and foremost, get interested in getting certified, right? So certifications, and also obviously these cloud platforms, they provide these certifications, right? So Google has their own, Microsoft has their own, AWS has their own, and so forth. There's a plethora of certifications, and I'm going to be diving deeper into these in the coming weeks in terms of which ones, which company provides which one, and also making sure that you choose the right one for the right career that you're going. Because also in the coming weeks, I'll be even talking about the career paths that you can go into data. There's cloud computing, there's data science, there's data engineering, data analytics. So there's a plethora of new industries that have been born, and you don't necessarily have to have a BSc degree in them, you don't have to have an engineering degree to have them, but these certifications nowadays actually verify and certify to companies that you actually are familiar with the technology, and you are quite fluent and you can actually use the information, because nowadays a lot of companies are actually migrating to the cloud, right? So when I mean migrating is that they trying to shift from the on-premise using the whole data centers, and because of people are working from home, so they don't have to always come to the office to access the information there. But a lot of companies are also moving into the cloud, where the information and and their work is actually easily available. So what I strongly recommend is the first thing that you do is look into getting certifications, which is something obviously I will touch on in the next weeks. Number two, engage in a community, right? If you're interested in data, there is a lot of information that you can find on LinkedIn, on Twitter. The community there is quite crazy. There's always people out there talking about what's new, how to get started. There's a lot of people that are also doing a lot of cool things in the cloud space. So make sure that you guys, get very, very engaged and active in the community space. Lastly, I would also highly recommend is start building small projects, right? So when I mean projects, look at the small things that you can actually tackle. See, look at how data-driven companies actually deal with data. Learn how to probably access data using an API, or maybe how to manipulate data, how to clean data, how to add much more significant meaning to the data that you're actually working, because this portfolio is actually going to help you in terms of when you try to apply for any of these new tech roles, right? It's one thing that we know how to code, but it's another thing if you can actually leverage how to use data, how to use databases, how to use the cloud, how to store things onto the cloud, how to retrieve things onto the cloud, and so forth, how to leverage certain technologies that Microsoft has. So there's a plethora of them that Microsoft uses. There's blob storage, there's file storage, there's um, all of these services that Microsoft obviously offers. So that's also quite another way for you to actually grow and expand as a human being. So much more than said, guys. Yeah, thank you so much for actually paying attention to my TED talk. If there's any obviously information that you guys would like or have questions, these are all of my details. My email address is there. You guys can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Catfish Music, on Facebook and on Instagram, Koketso Catfish Motseothata. And also, guys, do check out my tech blog, um, right over there, koketsomotse.co.za. And yeah, it's been quite cool and interesting. Thank you.
Wow, you've said quite a lot, I have to say. That was quite a very informative session, I'll be honest with you. And yeah,
Thank you.
there haven't been some questions in the chat. There are no questions in the chat, that's what I can say. But I have some questions that I've taken note while you are speaking. You
Hmm.
mentioned data personalization, and I want to know what exactly is data personalization, and is it the same as machine learning as well?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So basically, what you remember I said that each company obviously has their own algorithm. So
Mm.
you must have heard of like the Twitter algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, the Instagram algorithm. So all of these companies basically they have their own sort of algorithm. I can't 100% verify or be sure that they all use the same algorithm, but I don't think so because Facebook and Netflix are two different platforms, right? So each company does have its own algorithm. So when it comes to data personalization, it's just generally meaning that it will cater to the information that you have about you, right? So let's say, for example,
Um, Seems to be a disconnect from Koketo's side. Um, okay. Yeah. Looks like Koketo went a bit offline. When he comes back, we'll be sure to add him onto the call again. So yeah, I think he's back. Koketo is still there. Okay, he's still sorting out some issues. Um, until Koketo comes a bit back, we've come into the conclusion of today's episode, today's session. Koketo was telling us about data personalization and machine learning is that they're almost the exact same thing, and they do the almost the exact same stuff, whereby they use data to learn, to learn, and also to see the trends and the habits of people's usage of how they make use of the data, basically. So that's what Koketo was trying to tell us before he got cut. Um, would you like to
yeah,
finish
no,
off what
sorry.
you're saying?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, no, no, I'm back. I'm back. Yeah, so as I was saying, in terms of what data personalization is it does involve machine learning, and what basically it does, it just takes your matrix, it takes your information, and basically according to the algorithm, because you must understand that these companies have huge data centers, they have huge computing power, so they have enough information to actually generate these algorithms on per user, right? So looking at the amount of searches that you have, obviously it will mark a certain keyword, and throughout the algorithm, it will actually take out specific tags. Actually, it uses tags or specific keywords that will actually identify that, okay, so me as Koketso, I like all things funny. So if I type in maybe comedy, it will pull in things like romantic comedy, horror comedy, children's comedy, all types of comedy in that sense. So that's personalizing. It's like when you go to fit a suit, right? You have a tailor. When you say tailor made, so your account basically is tailor made specifically for you. And as I said, they have an algorithm which is extremely powerful. So they would know how it actually works.
I see. I see. Well, like I said, you mentioned a lot of things, and I was quite keen on that data personalization. And also, you mentioned about how we can make use of all the data and how the company makes use of all the data. So, speaking about that, to add on top of this session, this Saturday at the Global Azure Conference, we'll be talking about natural language processing, and also and we'll have a second session where we'll be talking about all things data, to add on top of what Koketso just mentioned now, where Jessica and I will be showing about how we can use machine learning in our everyday life more specifically, and touching on exactly what Koketso has been talking about. So it will be just an add-on for next week's session as well, so be keen to check that out as well. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
uh
most definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, as I said, guys, this is a four-part series. So, yeah, just do make sure that you tune in if you really want to know more. Next week, we're going to be diving a little bit more deeper in terms of the nitty-gritty things of data. We'll be talking about the nitty-gritty things of cloud. We'll be looking at the different career paths you guys can even take. We're gonna look at very interesting facts that that I've got for you guys that are really really interesting. Then we're going to be touching about that most important exam that you guys definitely need to pass, that AZ 900 exam. I did it. I don't know, Nasis, did you finally do it?
I'm gonna do it in the coming weeks. That's what I can say.
Oh, okay, all right, all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
So I'm also paying at specifically attention to this as well.
All right, awesome,
Well,
awesome. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
no problem. So there you go, folks. We got the Global Azure Conference coming up, and Koketo's three-part series, which will be continuing in the coming weeks as well. So stay tuned and don't miss out. Follow us on our social media pages and stay in touch for more exclusive content. Till next time, see you.
Cheers, guys.